I am a miracle.
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 I am a miracle. And this is my story.
Good evening. Welcome to the second episode of I Am a Miracle, My Story podcast. I am the host, Father Stephen Kirk. Through the lived experience of the guests we have this evening, I seek to understand and have us all better understand what it means to be better for having been broken. Before arriving here on my path through salvation, healing, redemption, I knew intimately a life of crime, addiction, and the mean streets. Now my goal is to unlock the miracles of greater mental, spiritual, and even physical health through stories and a mindset and an attitude of better for being broken. I'm excited and hopeful that you're here this evening and that you're a part of this I'm a Miracle story journey. Welcome. My first guest this evening is Liza Postel. Liza, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let me introduce you to our audience. I know you, you're a good friend, but let me introduce you to our audience and tell them a little bit about who you are and your background. I'm welcoming Liza Postel to the show this evening. Liza, you served in the United States Air Force as an enlisted behavioral health specialist and conducted the mental health assessments necessary to clear fighter pilots. You are now the general manager for Sterling McCall Alexis of Clear Lake, and I would add, as I understand it, one of the few African-American general managers and female general managers in the whole Houston market, if I have that correct. Some years ago, you were diagnosed, however, with stage 4 cancer, and you were told you had 6 months to live. Though devastated, you were determined to prove your doctors wrong. At a time when depression and a life-changing diagnosis such as this could have crushed you, you found the will and the strength to fight on and become better for being broken. I thank you for being here and to be able to tell your story.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with this. Let's start this way. A little bit about childhood. What was it like, family structure? Well, just take a few minutes and hit that.
I grew up in Panama City, Panama, Central America, that little string that connects North America to South America, where the United States still houses the Panama Canal. But I grew up in the slums, not in a ghetto, or I was not homeless by. I wasn't homeless by any means, but I lived in a slum in Panama City. But I never thought that was the case because we always had plenty to eat. It was my grandmother, my grandfather, my mother, my aunt, my uncle, and myself living in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, very small home, but we had more than most. My grandmother worked she was a line supervisor for the Marlboro Company in Panama. They had a big factory in Panama. So she was one of my very first matriarchs. She was one of the very first women that I got to see doing the types of things that women typically didn't do or weren't allowed to do back then. Like I said, we were really poor. We didn't have a color TV, but we always had plenty to eat. And the one thing that was abundant in our home was love. So I could certainly say I was a beloved child.
Awesome.
That helped me learn fairly quickly that if you pour enough love and attention and time into just about anything, you might have the opportunity and the blessings to watch it grow right before you and develop into something great.
College Tell me something about college.
I was an adult college student, so I didn't go to college until after I had been out of the military. Through my GI Bill, I realized that once I was out of the military, I needed to do something because I had a child. I was a single parent, and the one thing I was not going to be was a statistic. And I knew that my mother had taught me that you can outwork just about any problem. Whatever problem, whatever ailment, whatever issue you're suffering to, God has given you everything within you to fight it, beat it, and redefine yourself, no matter what it is that you're going through.
So college came after the military.
College was well after the military.
Okay, all right. And okay, marriage, married life, married kids. When did that happen? When did that?
Just 15 years ago.
Okay.
So 15 years ago,
Late college, late marriage.
that was way after the Air Force, after college, and after I had started my career in the automotive industry. Actually, while I was in my career in the automotive industry, I taught this very rough around the edges Philly guy who started selling cars at our store. To be honest with you, I thought he was part of a work release program. But he was very cute, though.
Okay.
He was very cute. But I taught him how to sell cars. I was one of the business managers. We did very, very well together as far as selling vehicles. We were a good team. We made a lot of money together, and all of a sudden, after working together for about a year, he got a liking to me. And if he were any more pushy, I probably would have taken him to HR, but I didn't, and we ended up getting married shortly after that crush developed.
Awesome, awesome. Let's go to the time in which, where in your life story, as you've shared thus far, that you received this cancer diagnosis.
So I just re-enlisted in the military. I had already served 4 years. My son he wasn't even a year old. And I started having a lot of tummy trouble. Sometimes vomiting to the point where I was vomiting blood. I was in sick call just about every other day. Started losing weight fairly quickly. At that point, that was where things started getting fairly low in my life because my bosses thought that I was malingering. We were preparing to mobilize and start setting things up in Iraq during that time. This was '99. So me having a new baby, my supervisor assumed that I was trying to either get out of deployment or get out of work, and that was one of the reasons that I was in sick call all the time. But the reason I was in sick call is because I had a tumor and a lesion, a squamous cell lesion growing in my esophagus. That it was a squamous cell cancerous lesion that had been growing in my esophagus, and sometimes when I would eat, acid reflux would cause that lesion to bleed into my stomach, and it would make me really, really sick to the point where I had pain and I'd start vomiting and eventually vomiting blood. But in the military, everything is hurry up and wait. So we had an incoming physician, an internal physician that was going to be coming to the base, and then I would be able to have this endoscopy that we had been waiting on. The military didn't necessarily want to send me off base to get this endoscopy because at 21, 22 years old, who thinks you've got esophageal cancer? That's not what physicians first think of when you're having issues like I was having issues. So the internist was supposed to be there in a few weeks, those few weeks turned into a few months, and 3 months later, I had lost about 18 pounds. And at that point, I was having a hard time even getting food down. That is when I had my endoscopy. And during that endoscopy is when they discovered that I had this lesion in my esophagus. I specifically remember having them calling my boss into the room. I remember that my boss had a mask on, and I remember the internist telling my boss, "I've never seen anything. Are you seeing this? This is almost all the way down her esophagus. I've never seen anything like this." And for a second, I thought I was under.
But you heard.
I was under twilight sedation, but I never forgot that. And when I woke up, I thought for a minute maybe it was a dream, but obviously when I came to and I saw my boss there and the doctor's team having that very serious and sobering conversation, I realized that it wasn't a dream or a nightmare. It was for real.
When did you get the diagnosis? That was the.
I didn't actually get the diagnosis until I went in for major surgery. So removal of my esophagus typically takes, a big surgery like that typically takes 2 incisions, one down the middle, one down the neck. Because I was so young, doctors decided to do it in 2 parts, and I've got a long incision down my back and then one down the middle to avoid that long incision on my neck that would, that would show. So when we went in for surgery, the samples that they took, the biopsies that they took of the lesion when they did the endoscopy, they did not come back as malignant. So obviously they needed to go in there and see just what was affected by this cancer. The surgery was supposed to be about 6 hours long. It was about 11 hours long. They ended up having to remove more than 4 inches of my esophagus, my lymph nodes, a portion of my right lung. They had quite a bit of cleanup work, but that was when it was clear to them that it was cancer and it had metastasized, and that I was going to have a pretty long road ahead of me.
Maybe I missed it. The diagnosis that you found out in terms of your lifespan, what you were looking at, where does that fit into the surgery, and what is it?
After the surgery is when they told me that what I had was cancer.
Okay.
I asked them to please make sure that my mother was sitting down when they told her. That was my biggest hurt right then and there, was that I can't believe I'm gonna put my mom through all this. She had done so well. I was off on my way to the military and on my own. I had a child and I was taking good care of. I had my own place and my own things. And what I felt was a future in the military. So the most hurtful thing was, to me, was when they told my mom that I had cancer. So I did not find out until well after that time, because I was so young. There was not a doctor that wanted to tell me or my mother that I only had 6 months to live with chemo and radiation.
So they were saying you had 6 months to live. At what point did you find out you had 6 months to live?
After my surgery, my mother had stayed with me for quite some time to get me well enough and stable enough to where I could actually travel back home, where she could take good care of me. The military had decided that they were going to medically retire me. There wasn't much that I could do in my state for the military at that point. So I did not find out that I had 6 months to live until about 3 months after I had recovered from that surgery and I was already flown back home. I was sitting at the VA, at the Veterans Administration, reading my file because there was nothing else to do in the waiting area. And when I read my file, that's when I found out that that I had 6 months to live.
And you were how much into that 6 months at that point?
I was already 3-4 months in. That meant that
You had 2 months.
I had 2 months. I had 2 months left. At that point,
Wow.
I'd have to say that's probably where the light bulb went off, and I realized that this was God's plan.
Thank you. So we're 4 months in to 6 months to live. You've been through the surgery. What was that the darkest moment in this whole thing? Would you say that was that?
The darkest moment was probably before that, but after I got my cancer diagnosis after my surgery, when I was finally released from the hospital, and I had been in the hospital for so long, I had lost so much weight and I was so pale, I had lost most of my hair, that my 1-year-old no longer recognized me. So he
Your
didn't know who
1-year-old no longer recognized you?
He didn't know who I was. He wasn't allowed in the ICU. I had so many tubes and things coming out of me for such a long time that I couldn't hold him. My mother would bring him to visit me, but it was so distressing to him that he couldn't sit on the bed, that I couldn't hold him, that after a while it just didn't make sense for her to bring him as often. So when I went back home, I just didn't know who I was.
You could have thrown the towel, but you didn't, or we wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
What in you, who you are, gave you, 3 months, 4 months into 6 months, what was it about who Liza is that didn't crush you, kept that from crushing you? Please share that with us.
It was my mom. It was my mother. It was my child. It was God. It was my mother reminding me that this was God trying to speak to me, that I needed to listen, that regardless of how much pain I was going through, that there was a purpose in all of this. And she didn't know what that purpose was, but she knew that it was greater than her and it was greater than me. But we needed to get past it. We needed to get past all of it in order to find out what it was. So she urged me, she begged me to start talking to God, request an audience with him. Ask him why, because he was the only one that was gonna have the answers. She was humble enough to let me know that she didn't have the answers, but she knew that there was something greater to come of all this.
So you had those conversations. Turned to God. What did you do next, though? What course of action did you then? Did you hear from God? Did God speak back to you?
God spoke back.
What did God say?
Seek me out. Seek me out. This is the beginning. This is where things start. And that's when I started looking back and realizing that cancer was God's plan to save me. to show me what was on the other side.
Let me just make sure I heard that. Cancer was God's plan to save you. What does that mean?
I just reenlisted in the military, as I mentioned, for another 4 years. There's no getting out of that. And a very large team from the hospital that I worked at, the base at Nellis Air Force Base, was deployed to Iraq to ready Iraq for what was going to be next. I would not have been able to get out of that situation. I was going to have to leave my less than 1 year old child with my mother to go fight in this war. I was in a relationship with my child's father that was just ugly and spiraling downhill fast. Obviously, to not have a very good working environment if my boss is looking through my medical records to see if I'm lying and malingering to try to get out of work. So it was God's way of telling me that my place was close to my mother, that my place was back with my family, where I could heal, where I could go to church, where I could see what was waiting for me on the other side of this recovery.
Better for being broken. That's why we're here. You embody that. How did you pick yourself up? You tell me more about it in terms of his plan for saving you. How did that unfold? Bring us forward from there.
I asked God. I asked God to show me what his will was for me, and that as I fulfill that, to just show me where I am supposed to be going, where I'm supposed to be directed, because I'm very distracted. I get distracted easily. I ask God to keep me focused, and more importantly, I told him that I would follow his will, but all I wanted was to see my son graduate high school, and the rest has been history. He's continuously showing me the path. I certainly didn't think that I'd be selling cars my whole life, but here I am. It's brought me here.
You're an awesome person, Liza. How is it that you, through all that, and you're a star in what you do in terms of car business, how do you bring from that experience to be a blessing to help others? How are you able to do that? Are you able to find a way from what you've been through to put that at the disposal of others, to pour into others, to somehow let that to be a blessing to others based on?
Absolutely.
What does that look like?
As you mentioned, I'm one of the very few Afro-Latina women running a dealership, much less a luxury dealership. I get to fill that dealership with all the broken talent I want. All of those people that are building their lives and seeking an equitable environment to work. I can provide that to them. And I can also be, I can also be someone to bounce those really difficult things with that you're going through at the job. I sit down and I camp with my associates on a regular basis. I look for what things in their lives could use a little tweaking, could use a little love, could use a little attention, so that we can build a better them, because that in turn just overflows into the business that I'm trying to build. If they're a little happier at home with their life, with their relationship with God, it all just overflows and does quite well when they bring all that extra to work with them.
That blessing that you just described that you are to others, when you received that 6 months to live, could you even fathom that one day you'd be sitting here sharing could that even been, could you fathom something like that seems like life is very good for you now.
Father Kirk, I just bought my mom a house last year.
Wow.
That is,
Wow.
if that's not God putting it all together for me,
That same mom that told you to talk to God.
that same mother that told me, this is, you had better find an audience with God. That same woman is now in a nice little house in Richmond, Rosenberg, away from the riffraff where she was living before. I refuse to let my mother live that way, sir. So yeah, I get to do this for her. I still have a wonderful relationship with my now 26-year-old son, who's out there making music and loving his mom every opportunity that he gets. I'd never have an opportunity to see any of that. Being married to my husband, considering everything that I had been through with cancer, going through chemo for that almost 9-month span of time, I went through menopause, and I was no longer producing eggs. So when I went into remission, I asked my doctor if I'd be able to have children, and the answer was like, maybe not. Would that be the worst thing to come out of this? And I said, absolutely not. So when I met my husband and his exes and the bonus babies, you would think that that would be a bad thing, but what I saw in it was that big family. Here's my big family that I've always wanted, and I don't even need to have them. They're already here. So I got a bunch of bonus extra babies that went along with marrying my husband, and man, it's been a really fun ride.
Well, Liza, you, as I said, you embody. I had to share your story with me. You embody better for being broken, and I'm deeply appreciative of your being here today and this evening and sharing pain, the trial, and now the joy, and even pointing back to that mother who told you it was going to be all right. So I thank you for being a part of the podcast, and just you're a blessing. I just encourage you to keep being a blessing and keep being Liza. The story is yet to be completed. All right. God bless you. I thank you for being here.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Father Kirk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My next guest is Pastor Gerard Dawsey, founding pastor of Bethel Church and Excellence Academy. Pastor Dawsey has overcome in life, a life in the shadows filled with violence, depression, and even despair, to become a mentor, community leader, and advocate for mental health. Today, he will take us through the dark days of his past and share with us how God has healed him from those scars to become a better for having been broken man of God. Thank you, my dear friend and brother, for being here, Pastor Dawsey. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Father Kirk.
All right. So look, let's start with some of the stuff from childhood. I have my notes in terms of raised by a single mother. So let's just start with that. Talk about that some.
So I was born in Galveston, but raised in Lamarck, Texas, right down the street on the mainland. Raised by a single mom. I don't have a slum story because my mom actually was raised by her grandmother, who actually owned a business, restaurant, and wasn't raised poor, but I was raised, and my mother made a lot of poor decisions, which made it look more like a slum. And I'm a twin, so I didn't come into this world alone. I came into this world with a womb mate, and we were her first kids. She had us at the age of 19, and pretty much raised us first few years. She stayed at my grandmother's, and then she got her own place and started struggling on her own, trying to figure out being a single mom. About 4 years after, when we were 4 years old, here comes another kid, my youngest sister. So here she is, a single mom raising 3 kids. It wasn't easy, let me say that, especially with us boys being the oldest.
Early on, I have my notes. There was an incident where, as I understand it, you were shot in the mouth.
Mhm.
Or you shot yourself in the mouth.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
Well, so my mom had a boyfriend who came to live with us at about the age of 4.5, and he was a hunter, so he kept guns. He taught us how to use guns, and he let us have a BB gun. And we used to sit around watching TV all the time and just, kind of being raised by the TV. And we watched, I want to say the movie was I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker. And so we were just all playing around. I wasn't intentionally trying to shoot myself in the mouth. But one of the lines, and I'm going to paraphrase, says something like, when I die, I'm going to die with a gun in my mouth, and whatever it says. So I'm just rehearsing the line as a kid and end up shooting it, putting it in my mouth, shooting it, not thinking that it was loaded, and it was loaded. It cracked one of my teeth. I had to be rushed to the hospital. The BB came within an inch of my spine. And the doctor said if it would have had just went another inch, that I would have been paralyzed. And I thank God that it went that way.
I'm sure you did.
Yes. They decided not to take it out because it was too dangerous to try to go in there. They were afraid of causing more damage.
At what age?
I was 12.
Did you have was there any mental, any after that happened, did that leave you mentally scarred anyway? I mean, did you have any
I think I was just happy to be alive.
All right. I'm sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that. Fast forward, a few years older, and I know we talked. Where did the gangs and violence, and where did that start in your? Where were you with that?
So
What age were you when that started?
I'd have to rewind in because I was around the age of 10 or 11. My mom was at work all the time, so she didn't know what we were doing. She was trusting my older cousins to keep an eye on us. And they were already involved in gang activity, involved in selling drugs, criminal activity. And so one day we were out at the park, and they told me and my twin brother that, hey, it's time for you to get started in the gangs. Say, we're not gonna make you pick which gang, but you're gonna have to pick one. Say, we gangbang, you're gonna gangbang. You pick our side, we'll take a little light on you as far as the initiation. If you go to the other side, it's gonna be a much bigger problem. And so me and my brother both decided that we were gonna go ahead and start our initiation into the gang.
You were at what age?
11.
Okay. And How long did that last?
Well,
How long were you? Yeah.
when we were jumped in the set, it's supposed to be blood in, blood out, and so it's supposed to last a lifetime. Being that my the street life is different. Let me say that, because people rise and people fall and things happen. Most of the people at the top were being either killed or in jail. So a lot of the rules as far as blood in, blood out didn't apply. You know, I decided around, I guess, my teenage years that I'd stop running the streets. My auntie came, picked me up, and started bringing me to church. And it was then when I decided I was going to try a different way.
What age were you?
I was around 14 then.
Okay. 19. What happened at 19?
So,
Age 19.
age 19, I had finished high school, and I was in college. I had graduated high school with honors. So I ended up going on about an 80% scholarship to go to University of North Texas. And there, by that time, I kind of got out. I was going to church. I was at the church, but I wasn't in the church. And so some of my past started reaching and grabbing me. I started smoking marijuana, hanging out, with some of the, rough heads on the college campus. And a lot of them liked to smoke marijuana too. So I started dealing marijuana there. And we were hanging out one night. One of my classmates was driving. Police went to pull us over. Asked him to try to outrun them like we would do in the hood. He tried, he couldn't, we was on campus. And so when they stopped, the police came, we were also drinking. So I tried my best to see if we could just, maybe talk ourselves out of it. And
Not happening.
yeah. And so all I knew about police at that time was that if they stop you, they gonna harass you, they gonna search you, just like in the hood. So I went back to my roots. I, got out the car and I took off. And I was, 19. That was pretty fast. I wasn't on the track team, but I was pretty fast. And so I ended up running through campus, finding a dorm room where I had some friends. Haired up, went in there and hid out. Police was looking for me. And after a few hours, it died down. I got up, and then I went back out. Police, I'm assuming you're getting to the arrest and the charge, or no?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah. Yes, go ahead. Yeah. Explain that, share that.
Yeah, and so I didn't know the guys too well. And the police kept coming around and asking who I was. Eventually, they was coming around every place I was hanging. I decided to turn myself in. And they charged me with evading arrest.
Evading arrest. So you're 19. This is your first case, as we say, case you caught, yeah, right? You had mentioned about the church. Are you being on the fence, I guess, about church? Or at this point, have you received a call to ministry? Do you feel where are you with the church and ministry and?
So when my auntie started taking me to church at 14, I was having dreams of preaching and dreams of me speaking to God's people and out on the street speaking to people about God's word. And I went and told my auntie, she said, you should talk to the pastor, By this time, she was taking me to Sunday school and to regular service. And so I just asked, could I help with the youth, you know? And when I sat down with the pastor and was telling them all of what was going on with me and my dreams and everything, he said, well, I don't know if you know this, but it sounds like you have a call to preach God's word. And it's funny because I laughed because I said, oh, that's what that is?
Okay.
And he say, yeah, he said, you don't feel like that? I said, well, you the pastor. You should know things like this, so I trust you, you know. So he decided that he would begin to start getting me ready. I think he gave me maybe a month or two to get ready for my first sermon. And so that's how I became the preacher.
Age?
14.
You started preaching at 14.
Preached my first sermon at 14,
Wow.
officially.
Pastor Darcy, you're preaching, but you're also in the street.
Yes, sir.
Just want to make sure we're on the same page. You're preaching, but you're in the street. You got one foot in the church and one foot in the street.
Yes, sir.
How long did that happen? How long was that to?
So it didn't happen just like that.
Oh, okay.
So the pastor who, you know, gave me the assignment to preach my first sermon.
Right.
Looking back, I would have told a young man my age, hey, let me train you, let me take you here, there, and all that. But, you know, some churches decide that it's more important to have the show, you know. And if you ask me, was I ready to start preaching and being a minister? No, I should have been trained. But that was his decision as a pastor. It wasn't too long after that he realized that it was a lot of street in me. And by this time, I had bought my best friend who had a call too, and he started preaching within the next 2 months. And I did in June, he was in October. And before long, my friend got into one of his deacons, and we was finna jump him. And the pastor called us in then and realized he had an issue, he had a problem, you know. And so he put us out the pulpit.
Put you out of the church?
Yeah, well, he put us out the pulpit and made it known that he didn't want to have us at his church.
Wow. And that was at age?
I had turned 15 by then. I had a birthday, so I was 15 by that time.
So that's, if you share with me, we talked about some depression, some dark parts of, though you've been in ministry since 14, you've had dark days. What would you say would be describe as the darkest part of your journey as you sit here today? What moment would you say would be what turns around depression? What was that about? Where was that about? When was that? When did that happen?
So, trying to make a long story short.
Please.
My grandmother
Take your time, man.
fought with depression. My mother fought with depression, my dad, you know. And so I didn't know it as a kid, but I feel like that it was something that was passed on. So there was a lot of dark days.
Can I ask you a question about that? When you say they fought with depression, what was that experience like for you? Did you experience that in terms of?
Well, I would, feel the empathy at that time, but maybe not the sympathy because I didn't know, you know. But
I was trying to understand how were you impacted by their depression?
yes, no doubt. And all I would do is try to.
What was it like? How were you impacted?
I would try to make them happy, you know, because I was sad when I would see them sad, you know.
So there was a lot of sadness.
Yes.
Okay.
And the darkest days of my life was when I started losing my loved ones. That's when I got
To depression?
most depressed.
To depression. Losing them to depression?
Have I lost them to depression?
You said losing your loved ones.
You asked me what was the darkest days.
Okay.
When I was most depressed.
Okay.
And that's when my deepest and darkest days was. And
What age were you then?
I was in my 30s by then.
And you were in ministry?
Yes.
Can you share what it was like to be proclaiming the word of God and yet be depressed, be dealing with depression? What was that like?
Well, at first it was pretty challenging because there were days I didn't even want to get out the bed, let alone, preach a sermon. I've always had my wife, she's also a minister. She'll pick it up if I just really can't do it. And it taught me how to just press through. And, I would just get up and I'd be honest, if I'm having a rough day, hey, this a rough sermon for me. I didn't get no sleep last night. And I go at it and do what God called me to do.
Were you getting any help? Were you seeing any therapists? Were you trying to just push through it, just by faith?
Well, at that very moment, no, I lost my mom first. 2 years later, I lost my brother. And I believe it was a few years after that, 3 years after that, when I decided, hey, yeah, I'm gonna go see a therapist. I went and saw a therapist, a few of them. Because
I'm just trying to understand
I was trying to understand what all I was going through. And I'm gonna back up. Me and my wife went to a couples retreat. And one of the therapists that was there, it was an intensive. One of the therapists that was there suggested that I do that I go and see a therapist. And he kind of started talking to me about my loss, even though we were there as a couple for marriage. He started talking and allowing me to understand more about what I was going through with the grieving and the depression. And so I decided then I would, go out and find a therapist.
Was that the darkest moment for you? The depression was the period that you're in right there. As you sit here now, in your journey, would you say was the darkest times for you in terms of what you've been through?
I would say yes.
And as men of God called to proclaim God's word, we want to believe, we tend to want to believe we're invincible, acknowledging that we experience depression, and notice I said we, can be unfathomable. I feel where you are. How'd you move forward and come forward in terms of how are you? Let me put it this way, in terms of podcasts. And thank you for sharing, being kind of that. You're on the other side of it now. How are you better? That was the dark time. That was depression. You got through it. How are you better?
Sir. Well, I'm better for being broken on the other side of it. I can travel all the way back from being raised by a single mom. I made a vow to the Lord that when I have kids, I was gonna be married. I was gonna be in my kids' life. They wouldn't have to worry about where daddy at when they're playing sports or when they have a choir recital. And I've been there. I have 4 kids now, and I'm there, and I'm present. At whatever they got going on in the house. Helping with homework, everything. I say I'm better because I never want my kids to feel the absence of their dad, my dad was in the same city that I was raised in my whole life, and wasn't there. And as far as the church is concerned, I know what it's like to be troubled in the church. I know what it's like to be trying to figure it out, and so I try to put myself in these people's shoes. I mean, I can talk to people about depression. I don't have just scriptures for them. I can talk about grief. I can talk about and understand it from an experience rather than just a head assent to it.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely better. I'm better.
You're better, and your ministry is better because you've been through. You feel like your ministry is better because you went through that.
Yes, sir.
So you're not blowing smoke at people. You can come with real. So this is the dark parts of your story, making that available in a real sense, a real way to people. You feel that's the better for being broken part of your journey.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and what in terms of the kid, your own children, what is life today like in the Dawsey family? Where
Well, my oldest two graduated high school. My oldest boy is playing college football.
awesome.
My oldest girl, she's working for us in the family business.
Okay.
My two younger ones are, my youngest girl, 7th grade, she's doing a great job in school, made the volleyball team. So that's what we've been doing. And my youngest, Joshua, he's up and coming. He's doing good. I believe they're all going to be great children, great success stories, for our future. They are our future.
Final question. Sitting here today, what would you, Gerard Dawsey, say to Gerard Dawsey at 19? What advice would you give Gerard Dawsey at 19 as you sit here today?
I tell him it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. Stick in there. Hang in there.
It's gonna be all right. Well, listen, Pastor Dawsey, thank you for your kindred spirit. I feel a real brotherly connection to you, and I know the struggle. Dealt with my own days of depression. And, so I thank you for being able to come and get real and share that and how you push through it and be authentic about that. Not enough of that in ministry, if you ask me. So I'm very, very appreciative as a brother, fellow clergy person. We share that bond.
Sir.
And I thank you for being part of this podcast, and I believe you are a miracle. And there's a lot of miracles out here. So thank you, but thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back. We'll be back.
Bless you.
My next guest, Reverend Norman Gilmore. Reverend Norman has a very triumphant life story about overcoming depression, PTSD, divorce, and even being suicidal. He's a military veteran, an ordained minister, and a trained mental health professional. My good friend and brother, Reverend Norman Gilmore, I thank you for being on the show today.
Pleasure to be here with you, Father Kirk.
Listen, we've talked about a lot of things. So let's just start with some of the childhood stuff for you. Tell me a little bit about the childhood structure, what family background a little bit.
I came from a military family. My father was in the Navy. They were all born and raised here in Texas, in Galveston. But after my mother and he got married, they were stationed in Long Beach, California, where he was in the Vietnam War and all of that stuff. And, I very rarely got to see him because he was doing combat time. We stayed there. We lived in South Central, where I grew up, till, I'm gonna say roughly to the age of 12. And that's when life for me began to make changes. Of course, growing up in South Central, um, I was inducted into the gangs early. For me, it was my family. I was seeking for a choice of words, I was looking for a family, something that I really didn't have at home. Me and my mom was always at it because, you know, you act like your daddy, and then my daddy didn't want to mess with me because you act like your mom. So I dealt with that at an early age. I felt like the outcast. So the gang life was easier, you know. My best friend stayed across the street from me. He was a gang leader. So, you know, he took me in. He was like my big brother. And as I advanced in my first day of junior high, I was shot on the first day of school. I
Shot?
was shot
Where?
in the leg.
Okay.
I had to go back to school the next day, gunshot wound and all. I didn't know at the time I was getting reinitiated. I got jumped on every day by at least 20, 30 people. And at that time, I was a little short, scrawny little kid. So it toughened me, you know. It made me, it started the cycle of my, I didn't know, could say depression and stuff at the time, but it began the process of my anger and my bitterness and the entry level of suicide.
And you're what age now?
When this happened, I was about 13, maybe. Yeah, 13, somewhere in that realm, after I was shot. And then after a certain amount of time, my mom got tired of it, and she sent me here. And I grew up with my grandmother and a bunch of cousins and things like that, but I didn't want to be here. I wanted to go back to Cali. I wanted to be back around my friends. I didn't want to be a part of this country hillbilly life. I wasn't used to it. And so I got angrier. I got more bitter. And my grandmother did her best, and I love her to this day. She taught me and gave me a foundation of being a gentleman. And she started me on my venture of going to church, even though I didn't pay too much attention at the time. But she introduced my foundation, and I didn't have to worry about the gang life here in Texas because there was none. You know, so I would go back every other year or two back to visit my mom, and I got to interact with my friends and stuff. But I started getting in trouble with I don't know if you know what they call the 77 precinct in Cali. They're like their own police gang. And they roughed me up a few times, and then I was back on the plane coming here. So childhood part about it, you know, it's not no glamorous life, but it's the only life I knew. I was seeking love. I just wanted to know what it felt like to be loved. And that carried on to where I can say now it affected me from childhood to now.
Still trying to deal with process. Shot first day of school at age 12. Look, so you know, you got in the military. What age? What your military service started at what age?
I was 21. I had after I graduated high school, I went to college.
You got through high school.
I went.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got through high school. I went to college, Mississippi Valley State, on a basketball scholarship. But that California attitude was still there, and all I wanted to do was party. So I left it. I just walked away from it all. I came back to Texas, And I tried to go back to school again because my mom wouldn't go because I was getting paid from the government because of my dad. And I really wasn't into it. So a cousin and I was promised a job back in California. When we got there, the person reneged. And so me and my cousin, we was high. Ooh, we were so high that day. We rode around to the recruiting station where my dad used to work before he had passed away. And we didn't even know we had enlisted in the military because we were so high. And LAPD had to come and get us and escort us to the airport to be sent out to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And that was the beginning of the military.
When you were in the military, you got in the military, you got away from the gang stuff? I mean, that just kind of fell by the wayside when you got in the military?
Yes.
So you could put that in the past, but what about the depression? Did that follow you into the military?
I didn't even know I was depressed, to be honest with you, because I was always taught to handle it, deal with it. You know, you don't have time for this attitude. I didn't really understand the meaning of being depressed or feeling the way that I was feeling at the time. The military helped me to be an escape because everything I did and everything I volunteered for was something that could cause me bodily harm, or it could help me to commit suicide and get away from it all. But I would always volunteer for missions that really I wasn't qualified to do, but I would, you know, as a young private PFC at the time, you know, I was out there. And the more I learned, the more equipped my mind became for survival. I was in a different type of survival mode at that time because I was guarding my emotions and everything from the world. I didn't know how to care about anything. I didn't care about anything. And my first wife I married when I went into the military, and great first wife. I mean, my first wife was the ideal wife, but I didn't know how to love her. I didn't know how to treat her like a wife because I was never taught. I didn't have any examples of. So basically, I just sabotaged that marriage. You know, I just couldn't stay from running the streets and chasing women, and because that's all I saw. You know, when you see your parents doing certain things and you grow up and you think that's the norm. So I did what they did, and it caused me to hurt people that I cared about. I can't say I loved because, like I said, I didn't know how to love.
It said hurt people, hurt people. So you, in terms of what you're saying there, I'm staying with so that marriage ended divorce. You know how to love. When did you begin to, or during that time period, in terms of diagnosed with PTSD, depression, when did quote unquote suicidal kind of thoughts, or like when did that start?
The suicidal thoughts?
When did that? Is this a period where that stuff began to weigh upon you?
The suicidal thoughts started from childhood. I remember I was so angry one day. I went in the medicine cabinet and I took every pill.
At what age?
Oh, on that attempt, I might have been 10, give or take. I just, you know, as a kid, I was just like, you know, what's the use, you know, because I was abused and treated like crap, you know.
Physically abused, sexually abused?
No, not sexually, physically. You know, growing up in them days, the worst thing you could do is tell an adult they're a lie. So it was a shame that as I got older, I realized grown-ups lied on me to watch me get a whooping, you know. And back then, you know, it didn't matter what you got whooped with. You know, you got it. You just toughened up, and you know, to a point to where as my mom could whoop me, and I never cried. I just sat there and let her hit me, and she was like, "You ain't gonna cry?" You know, what difference is it gonna make? It's not gonna stop you from doing it. Because if I cried, the first thing come out your mouth is, "Shut up." Okay, what you want me to do? Make up your mind. So, and then I remember going, I don't know if I was the same age or what. We went to visit a friend of hers, and there was an apartment complex that had a pool. I couldn't swim a lick. I took out running and jumped in that pool. And I sat at the bottom of that pool and watched people. And a man jumped in and pulled me out.
You were trying to take your life?
Back then,
And what age were you?
I don't know. I could have still been 10 or 11, give or take. Suicide for me was a thing that I just couldn't pull it off. You know, I didn't know that God had a calling on my life at the time. All I knew, I was tired. I was tired.
You were tired at age 10.
Yeah, I was tired. I was tired. I was through. I didn't, you know, when you realize or you feel as a kid that you're not loved and wanted by your parents, then what? You know, what's the use? You know, why am I still here? You know, and if there was a God, why are you allowing me to go through all this torment? And then until I got older, then I realized, you know, it took years for me to find out why. And my last suicide attempt, no, I tried it in the military many times. But God just had his hand on me. He was not going to let me die that way. But the depression, I think, sat in when things were starting to materialize and come to the forefront. When I think we discussed it before, I was working in the oil fields at the time, and God wanted me to write a book. And I was like, you know, I don't even like reading, more or less write a book. But he shut me down out in the desert. And I was there to make money. I wasn't there just to sit around. I had truck notes and bills to pay, my wife, my kids. And he shut it down. And he said, I need you to write this book. He didn't say, you're gonna. I need you to write this book. So after about a week of sitting there, living out the back of my truck, I said, okay, God, what is it? What is it you want me to write about? What's so important that I'm worthy enough to write this book? And so I said, you give me the subject. And so basically, as the foundation, he gave me Moses and the children of Israel. And he named it Walking It Out from Egypt to Canaan. And I still wasn't there. I wrote the book. I got back to work. And I finally left from out there in the oil field, came home, and I stopped trucking for a while. Tried to get me a 9 to 5, but it wasn't working. So I went back out in trucking. And after a while, everything just kept pouring out. I would cry all night long. Every night I would cry. I'd be just just tears, not understanding why.
Were you getting any help? Did
No.
you see anybody?
No, because at the time I didn't know I had a problem, that I knew that I had a problem to go get help.
The depression, the attempts at suicide, I mean, none of that seemed to you, that seemed normal.
It just seemed normal to me because I've been doing it ever since I was a kid. So to feel that sense of wanting to take my life because I felt like I wasn't worthy, I wasn't a good father, I wasn't a good husband, I just, you know, why? Why am I still here when all I'm causing is pain to people that I should be loving? you know, when I got married the second time, my wife to this day, she hung in there like a champ. And she weathered the storms, the hurricanes, everything. She weathered it. And she was a woman of God, and I wasn't there. And one trip I was out, I was on my way coming back from Alabama with a load of steel. And I was just thinking and thinking and thinking. And I said, I know the exact spot I can take me in this 18-wheeler, and there's no return. So it was the bridge and not Beaumont, dang, I
All
can't.
right.
But in Mississippi, Louisiana. So when I got there, I was like, all right, I'm ready. I made peace with it. I'm good.
Ready to commit suicide?
Yeah, I knew the spot that I said. I maneuvered that 18-wheeler to the exact spot I knew I had to be in. And as soon as I was getting ready to go off, a car came and cut me off and brought me back to reality. And I missed my spot. So when I got down off the bottom of the bridge, I pulled over and I said, I'm done. I said, I don't know what it is, but I can't even commit suicide. You know, what is it? So I came home, I parked that 18-wheeler, and I never got back in another one. And then that's when my journeys began, and me having my personal relationships with God, because I needed answers. So when I realized I was really having a bad time, I had a nervous breakdown when I had hurt my ankle, and they was putting a cast on me. When I got home, I had a massive, massive panic attack just because of that cast being on it. I felt like somebody had put me in a coffin, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do nothing. And she took me to the center in Texas City, and that's when they found out that I was suffering from massive depression and PTSD. And
This is what age?
I was in my 40s now.
Is this the bottom? Was this bottom? Was this the bottom for you? Was this the dark? Is this?
Was that the darkest part in my life? It was the second darkest. The darkest thing that I did with, I don't really discuss that much.
Okay, all right.
And that was during my military time.
Okay.
But this here was when I knew that I was in this dark place that I had to deal with. That's when you can say the darkest. I had been living in that dark place for years, not knowing where I was, because everywhere I went looking for help, I was turned away. The church turned me away. Life turned me away. There was just nowhere to go. And
suicide didn't work? You tried?
Suicide didn't work.
Couldn't even do that right?
I couldn't get that one right either. So after a while, I was laying in the bed. It was like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And it wasn't nothing but the Holy Spirit that came in. And I got up out the bed, went into the den, and God just worked me. And I got, I don't know what it was. Big as I am and as tough as I was being whipped. And I just, another boohoo moment, that I was being cleansed with all of those tears and heartache and pain. And then God said, it's time.
It's time for what?
To open up that Pandora's box. It's time for you to face everything. And that's when the book came into play, that every journey that I went on was an Egypt to Canaan, the bondage, and then the freedom. So I kept repeating the journeys over and over until I got to a point to whereas it was all good. I went to the therapist and all stuff, but I had a 27-year-old therapist trying to tell a 50-some-year-old man what's wrong with him. You don't know what's wrong with me. VA, like the first guest, they will rather see you crazy than to help you. So I got a chance to go to school. And so I decided to take psychology. I wanted to learn about me.
That was the darkest. You finally throw up your hands and acknowledge you need help. Come forward. That's the darkest. How, in terms of where we are, what's better like? What's the better? I mean, I can't. we can keep going. It seems like it's in terms of the dark part, but how do you come forward and use this? Are you better today?
Am I better today?
How are you better? What's better now? What's better for being broken and for Norman look like today?
Being broken is the best thing that ever happened.
Because
it helped me to understand other people that are broken just like I am. I'm still broken. One of the things that God showed me, he showed me this vase that looked chipped and all out of whack. And he said, this is what people see of you, your brokenness. They see you disfigured. They see all of these imperfections of you. But the thing of it is, you're usable.
how?
Because he said, what I pour into you will never leak out. People are going to see it, but they don't see what's being poured into this imperfect vessel. Because if I wanted a perfect vessel, I would have created a perfect vessel. I've already done it once, but I broke him. He got broken as well, but he was still usable. So when I went through my journeys and I got my degree, I didn't want to be a counselor. I wanted to be a peer support specialist because I had avenues that I could touch people that a counselor and a therapist can't. I could use my life to relate to them and help them to begin their healing. And
How do you do that?
It's like, okay, you mentioned that you didn't fall from heaven, you crawled up from hell, okay? I didn't crawl up from hell. There was no crawling out of that hellhole I was in. I was too deep in. I was down there. The only way I got out of that is that I kept hearing this noise in the background going, shh. So, that's messing with my head. And I'm thinking, now I'm going even crazier because that's all I'm hearing in this dark place is shh. So, I kind of chilled out and I was like, it went different. It went shh, shh, like telling me, quiet. And the voice came and said, it's not the imps that are screaming and drowning you out. It's you. You're screaming so loud for wanting this, and this. You can't hear me telling you, just raise your hand up. Raise your hand up and you'll feel me. I will grab you and I will pull you up out of that dark place. And I was scared because I'm down in the fetal position. I'm just terrified. And so finally I reached up and I felt, and just for saying it, I felt the hand of God grab me and started to pull me up. And as he pulled me up and I began to see the light, he said, do you see my glory? Can you see it from here? And I said, yes. So when I felt my feet hit the ground, he said, now you can go back down there and fight, because every time you go down there, my glory will be on you. You won't have to walk in fear. You're gonna go get Sammy Sausage Head, Dumb Billy Bob, all of them that's down there. You can go do it, because everybody is not equipped to do that. And I mentioned that to a couple of pastors and stuff. I said, are you willing to go back into that dark place that you hide from because you're afraid to show your trueness, because you're the pastor or you're the apostle? Will you put that title down and go down there and go get Sammy Sausage Head?
So you're better for being broken.
Absolutely.
Is about your ability, gifting, anointing to go back into hell and get
all day long. I will go back and forth up in there all day if God tells me to go get somebody. And that's where my ministry is now, to work with the broken, to let them know that there is hope. Even though you're in that dark place, all you got to do is listen and hear the voice. And he's going to send you somebody to help pull you out that's not afraid.
You're not afraid that you're not afraid to go back, that you might not make it back. You're not afraid that
They evicted me.
they evicted you?
Yeah, hell evicted me, because when God sends me there, I'm there with authority of God. It ain't me. That beacon, the light that them people see, is his glory saying, I got you, my child. When everybody else cast you to the wolves, I had you. You survived. I'm going to send you a survival person that has walked the walk and survived because he believed in me. I wouldn't be where I am today. There's no way in the world that I could be where I am today if I didn't surrender myself and face each and every journey. It's a journey, and I survived, and I'm still going through them each and every day. It's not something that ends. I have to deal with depression and PTSD every day. It's a fight, still to this day. I can be sitting at home, and all of a sudden I'll start to tear up. Why? Why am I crying?
So how are you better?
Because I'm still surviving. See, that's the whole part that I think when people say, how are you now? I'm not going to say that old church thing, oh, I'm blessed and highly favored. No, I'm a work of God. Everybody is blessed. And being highly favored makes me different, in my opinion. I'm blessed every day because I went through all of the darkness, all of it. It taught me and it humbled me that there are especially men that are going through this, and they know and feel that there's nobody there that understands, is willing to stand and fight for me, that will not drop them and shatter them. There are many, many avenues to where I've been and where I'm still headed. I'm not afraid of the PTSD, the depression. I'm not worried about suicide because I know it ain't gonna work. It's just a waste of time. God has proven that, and he's shown me. It's like you said with you when you went through your situation, and you could have been shot up and everything, but you knew you had a purpose after all of that. Yeah. And after going through it all, you like, hey, it is what it is. I'm the type of person that I'm not the holy man of God that, I'm not stuck on titles, even though I'm a reverend or as my pastor called me, a doctor. I'm Norman, or as most people call me, I'm Pop G. That's who I am. I'm just a man. I'm not a title. I don't ever want to be a title. I'm not going to walk up to you just because I have a doctorate degree. Oh, my name is Dr. So-and-so. No, I'm Pop. I'm a man that's been walking this walk for 60 plus years, fighting for the underdog. And I'm not going to give up that battle. And, you know, we've discussed it. I'm not afraid to die. I'm not afraid to fight. I'm not afraid. My spiritual mother, you're a modern day Peter. I'll slice you and dice you going and coming and tell God, well, you know, hey, he got in the way. You need to pick that ear up and put it back on him. I don't care. You know, if it's about kingdom, I'm going after the one. You know, 99 at the house. But I'm going down to go get Sammy Sausage Head because Sammy Sausage Head want to come home and graze in the pasture too. So where everybody else is going to turn their back, if I get a chance and God sends them to me, like it was when I worked at the mental health place, I'm there. You know, I think I mentioned when I was there and I got dismissed and then I realized I had cancer. I felt bad because I told them I would be here for you. And I wasn't.
Norman, my brother, I've never met anybody like you. And I mean that in the most highest praise. And you're an awesome brother. Thank you for being who you are and letting God use you the way he uses you. And I have much mad respect and love for you. You're great.
Best is still yet to come.
This is about unlocking miracles and miracle stories and better for having been broken. And my brother, you embody all of it. So I thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being back again. Thank you. All right. I want to thank all our guests today for sharing and being part of the I Am a Miracle, My Story podcast, and for sharing their stories of better for having been broken. A goal of the podcast is to provide inspiration, particularly to people in dark spots in their lives. Hopefully somebody's going through something, a dark moment. Hope that the podcast will provide the inspiration, help you take control of your life and take control of your story. If you like what we're doing in the podcast, we hope that you'll share with others and like and subscribe about the podcast. Also have interesting materials about my own story about overcoming. You can find that content, Tales from the Wreckage, the beginning. You can find that at movingtheworld.us or rectamerica.com. I also want to thank our corporate sponsors. Particularly, we have 4 corporate sponsors that have been part of the podcast, sponsoring this podcast. They are Sterling McCall Lexus of Clear Lake, BMW and Mini of Clear Lake, Jaguar and Land Rover of Clear Lake, and finally, Mack Hike Toyota of League City. Finally, you can follow us on Instagram. It's I Am a Miracle Pod. And don't forget to tell a friend about the podcast. Look forward to you being part of the podcast in the future. Until then, may God bless.